for the first little while. He's over with our princesses at the county fair and involved there for the first little while this evening. We would anticipate him joining us a little later in the evening. So to begin with, I actually haven't asked anyone. Councilman Ivey, would you mind giving us an opening prayer? And Councilman Nyson, would you give the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I apologize for not asking earlier. No problem.
Our Father in heaven, as we come before thee this evening, we wish to give thee thanks for the many blessings that we enjoy every day, the places that we live, the place that we live, and the people that we associate with. Father, we're so thankful for our city and for our employees that makes it great. Please protect them and our fire and our police departments. We're thankful for all of our many blessings. We pray for Spirit to be with us here tonight as we conduct business, that we'll be guided and directed to do thy will, and that everyone will be able to leave feeling good about what happened here. We're thankful for our blessings. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate your help with that. Our first item of business is approval of our agenda. Looks like we have about 15 items on the agenda. I'll look for a motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the agenda for this evening.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston.
I'll second that.
Councilman Ivey at the second.
Nice night.
Belliston, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Turek, aye. Item number 2, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements for this evening? If not, we'll move along to item 3, a declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Any to declare this evening? Seeing none, we'll move to item 4, consent agenda. Our consent agenda consists of approval of our minutes from city council meetings on 7/25/2017 and 7/26/2017, and also our board audit report for July.
I move approval of the 2 items on the consent agenda, the minutes for 7/25 and 7/26 of 2017, as well as the audit report for July.
Motion by Councilwoman Granger.
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Nyson.
Nice night.
Belliston, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Turek, aye. Item number 5 is a legislative update. We're certainly pleased to have Senator Vickers here with us. Appreciate his willingness to take some time and come down and share with us and also hopefully glean a little from us. So we'll turn some time over to Senator Vickers.
Up here, I guess.
You bet.
Okay. Thanks. And Council, I really appreciate the opportunity of being here. I actually really enjoy going around visiting with the various city councils and mayors throughout my district. And partly because I served as a city councilman, I think that I have that kind of kinship a little bit with kind of the boots on the ground and the things that you guys are dealing with. And I appreciate, number one, I appreciate the work that you do and the efforts you put into your jobs. And it's sometimes it's a little thankless, but I know that and I know that the things that you work on are difficult. And sometimes they're tough issues that come up and you have to make tough decisions. And so anyway, I appreciate the efforts you put in and your willingness to serve. Thank you very much. You know, I guess it was before the session that was here last. And let me also excuse Representative Stannard. He's going to try to make another appointment. He was out of town this week, and we couldn't find a week where we both could make it work. So anyway, so he's going to schedule another time for you to be able to come before you as well. I know that there's always city issues that come into during the session, and that was no exception this year. Quite frankly, I lean quite heavily on the Utah League of Cities and Towns to find out certain issues. And of course, you know, Roger and the mayor and Colleen have been good to help me, understand maybe specifics on your issues you might have. And I appreciate very much. I know some of you came up to the Capitol this year, and that's always great. I really appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you if we can. And of course, anytime, don't hesitate to contact me if there's issues that we face. Some of the things the sessions behind in the rearview mirror far enough. I don't know that we need to rehash everything that went through that unless you have specific questions about any specific bills or issues that are related to that. Let me kind of give you a brief update on what's happening during the interim. Oftentimes we kind of focus that we have this 45-day session and that's where everything gets done. And quite frankly, it is. That's where the actual action takes place, barring some type of a special session. But there's an awful lot of work that goes on during the interim. We have appropriation meetings, we have policy meetings, we have committee meetings dealing with potential policies that can be addressed, in next year's session. So I chair higher education appropriations this year, and from the Senate side, and we've been very active in that. One of the areas that we're really working on is workforce demand. As we look at our institutions, and when I say institutions, I don't mean just Dixie and SUU and University of Utah and all the others. I'm talking about our UCAT system as well. Of course, that name is changing. Now they're going to be called technical colleges instead of College of Applied Technology. So I'm going to have to relearn that myself, and as we go through that process. But we recognize that there's upwards of 10,000 jobs in the state of Utah that are not being filled right now. And now most people think, well, the first thing they think of is high tech, computer technology in those areas. And that is an important component of that, but it's not the only one. We've done significant research to find out where those jobs lie. Many of them are in healthcare. I can tell you right now that there's a big nursing shortage, and that's going to get worse. High tech will continue to be a big portion of that. Construction trades. Interestingly enough, one of the areas that many businesses across the state are looking for are business graduates, but not just business graduates with specific skills, being able to have critical thinking and critical writing skills. And takes them to another level so that they're more adaptive and they can broaden the scope. So those are areas. And so many of the jobs fall into our technical college area. And so, the new building that's being constructed for Dixie Applied Technology, or Dixie Technology College, yes, it will be called. We recently had a new building built in Cedar City for Southwest Technical College. And those buildings and the efforts that will go into those buildings and training students and moving students into potential trades is going to be huge. I've learned an awful lot last year about higher education, but one of the things you don't think about often is the fact that technical skill, if a student was to go to get a certificate in a particular trade, they could go to work and make $30,000 or $45,000, somewhere in that range, on some skills, maybe on some even more than that. And if they choose to use that to go to a four-year institution and get a college degree later on, that's a scholarship. I mean, they can work their way through college, and oftentimes we don't think about that. We're looking at ways to stimulate institutions to prioritize funding, prioritize efforts in meeting those demands. We're looking at ways that we can incentivize first-time students, first-generation students to go to college, get a certificate, get a graduate degree, something post-high school graduate degree. So that's an area that I've been working on a lot. There was a lot of talk toward the end of the session about tax reform, and there was some efforts made to look at the sales tax and specifically sales tax on food and other things. There is discussions going on in the interim right now to look at our tax structure. Now, quite frankly, our tax structure is quite good. We're rated very high. We always fall into the top 5 or 6, usually somewhere in that range of the most favorable states as far as business taxes go, and from tax perspective. And so that helps us in our business expansion. And we've been fortunate. We've had good years. We've had income that have come in. Now, you know that income tax, most of that, in fact, all of it goes to education. And so the general fund is primarily based on sales tax and fees. And the sales tax has been a little bit of a challenge. It hasn't grown like income tax has. And I think you can attribute that to online sales. And that's there's issues going on and how to deal with that. But as the discussions about tax reform, it's not a discussion, from at least on the legislature side, how to raise taxes. That's not the discussion at all. The discussion is that as we look at our current structure, we're in pretty good shape. But you point yourself out there a few years and you start to see where the lines cross, and we don't sustain that because we're growing so fast. And so they're looking at ways to broaden the base and lower the rates. That's primarily the conservative approach to looking at taxes. And if we can take the sales tax and even lower the rate, but broaden what we're taxing, we can get, over time, we can get more money. And the same with income. We have a significant number of exemptions in our income tax structure. And so those are all being looked at and discussed. Right now, those discussions are ongoing. I have no forecast on what's going to happen, but I do want you to be aware of that. Now, there's 3 initiatives that are out there. One of those initiatives, the Our Schools Now, is looking at raising sales tax and income tax to put money into education. And last I heard, they had moved a little bit. They were talking about 0.5% on each, phased in over time. Now it's my understanding they're looking at 0.45% on each, but have that effective immediately. So that they're moving forward and trying to gather signatures and put that on the ballot. I'm not sure if that'll pass. We'll see what happens. There's 2 other initiatives that are out there, one on medical marijuana, and there's also an initiative that's trying to get some legs to change how we do redistricting. So when we establish, right now the legislature is responsible for the redistricting process, and that'll happen after the next census. And as we look at how to draw lines on maps to set up legislative districts, congressional districts, and state house member districts, there's a group in the state that would like to have that done by a nonpartisan group. There's some effort there. Here, I'm not sure if they'll get the signatures. I know that there's some significant effort going on there. That's possibly, so those 3 things could possibly be on the ballot in 2018. Things that could potentially come up. I know that there was discussion about the Airbnb law that was passed. There was some legislation that was passed this year, and there was significant interest, I know, by your city as well as other cities throughout the state. And those kind of decisions are tough because you have kind of 2 different property owners you're trying to protect. One, the owner that owns the piece of property that would like to use that as an Airbnb, and the other is the property owners that are surrounding it and what could potentially. And so you have to balance. And I understand, you guys understand that. And I don't know how much, if there's going to be more coming back on that. At least right now, I'm hearing that the sponsor of that piece of legislation last year is not planning to bring back, but that doesn't mean there isn't others out there that may want to. And my suggestion to the council is kind of discuss that amongst yourselves, and if there's a particular direction that you feel like is most appropriate for your community, please let me know so that we can keep that in mind if those discussions come up. So I guess with that, I'm really here to answer questions you might have, try to help in any way possible. And if nothing else, keep that line of communication open. I know it's always, you can read an email from me, you can take a phone call from me, but it's always nice to be face-to-face periodically. So.
Great, thank you. I think Councilwoman Granger, would you like to spend a little time with some of those concerns that we had? I don't know if you've sent those. I seen you sent them to the league.
No, I just barely gave them to him.
Oh,
So I
okay.
had a
Well,
chance
okay,
to
maybe-
look at them, but
Yeah, I just didn't know whether any of those needed any more explanation. There was a few there that as a council we've had some discussion on that we felt that there might be some time or at least know how we feel on some issues, and if there's any way you can give us any help, certainly we'd look to that.
Yeah, and now is the right time to be doing that too. So why don't we do this? I'll get with Colleen and we can visit in the near future. Any specifics you got, we can talk about specific areas and see if there's some.
Yeah, some of this probably needs a little more clarification, which face-to-face gives you or voice-to-voice gives you, that writing in a note, it's like, oh, really, what do you mean by this?
Sure.
So that probably would be a good idea. So.
And maybe if you can help me too, rank these a little bit too. What are your priorities? Who are they put on paper and kind of rank
pretty
them?
much they're all number
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do some research on that and get back to you. Pretty much all of them, is that it? Okay. Yeah. And that's good. Quite frankly, this is very helpful. That is always very helpful.
What's your feeling on taking over the federal land, the state?
You know, that's really an interesting question now because we have a change in administration, and you might get me on a little bit of a soapbox, so I'll be careful. But many of you know that we passed a resolution at the first of the session to talking about the Bears Ears National Monument and the Grand Staircase. And we took a lot of heat for that, but quite frankly, I stand behind that. And Secretary Zinke even used in his discussions talking about multiple use. Well, I grew up in some areas that are heavily public land. I grew up in Beaver, and I also grew up over in Panguitch, and those areas are heavily public lands. And I learned from this very young age that it was all about multiple use, and that the lands were a resource, and that if you took good care of them, they would continue to give back to you. But if you did not take care of them, then you lose that resource. So I believe heavily in that multiple use concept. There's been some direction from this administration. Secretary Zinke has toured the Bears Ears. He is, at least right now, he is looking at reducing the size and the scope of that, which I think is appropriate. I think that there's some areas within that designation that certainly deserve to be designated, but I think that the overall scope, put it in perspective, so you're talking, 1.4 million acres. So if you took all of the current national parks, national monuments, and state parks, with the exception of the Grand Staircase, it's 885,000 acres. Grand Staircase is about 1.3 or 1.4, and the same with Bears Ears. So that's massive. And so, for example, Cedar Breaks National Monument was designated back in the 30s. And it's about 35 or 40,000 acres. If you use the same concept that they've used on Bears Ears, Panguitch would be inside the designation. It goes that far. It would go that far. So that's, my feeling is that we need to continue to work toward an area where we can have more say in what happens on the public lands. I don't know if we would ever be able to say we're going to take them over. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. The courts are going to intervene on that. I just don't know that ever going to happen. But I think a realistic result is that we can get to a point where the state has more say in joining with the federal government on how that happens. Now we have an opportunity under President Trump and his administration on other issues like sage grouse, prairie dogs, those kind of things. And wild horse and burros. We've had visits from his administration. In fact, the Undersecretary of Interior was actually in Cedar City recently and ate dinner at my home, and we talked about these specific issues. She took tours of these areas and looked at specific things, and we're getting movement on that. And quite frankly, right now we're in a good spot because the new Deputy Director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife is Greg Sheehan, which was, up until that appointment, he was the Director of Division of Wildlife Resources in the state of Utah. Excellent guy, and he's in the right position to help us navigate through some of these difficult things. You may have read recently about how Secretary Zinke has specifically said he wants to redo the order on how sage grouse has looked, the sage grouse habitat and the direction on that. And it's going to be much more favorable to landowners and users of the public lands than what's done under the Obama administration. So I'm very hopeful that we can continue to move along that path and have an effort to where we can have more say in what's going on so that we can maximize the use of that valuable resource.
Okay. One more question, like Powell Pipeline.
Okay, I live in Iron County, and quite frankly, I was actually when I was on the city council, we actually had, at that time, we had access to the Kolob water. And there was a long history of that, and Cedar City back in the 1950s, they attempted to try to bring that water over. Well, when I was on the council, we were actually making headway, and then the Park Service came to us and said, look, we're not going to allow you to take water out of the Virgin and move it over there. It's just not going to happen. And so, and bottom line, they said, we got more money than you do, so load up and we'll beat you, And so we made some trade. That's when we made trade to Washington County Water Conservancy District. And that's how Iron County got an interest in the Lake Powell pipeline. Of course, since then, they voted to move out. And I'll be honest with you, when I was on the council, it didn't make sense for Iron County. But I look at you and look at Washington County, I look at King County, and as you continue to drill, I don't know how else you're going to get water over here. I don't see any other choice. You know, you just only have so much. I mean, Brad Lass and I were talking about this. You know, what you've done with the Virgin, you know, that relatively small flow that comes out of the Virgin River has been quite amazing. I mean, you've done an awful lot with it, and but there's a finite limit there, and so if this county is going to continue to grow based on expectations and what the projections, you're going to have some additional water resources from outside the district.
Senator, can you handle one more question?
Sure.
Northern Corridor. We've heard that it's come out of committee and it's moving along a little bit. Any update on that?
This probably what you heard. The last word I heard was very favorable, and it looks like it's, you know, moving to where it can become a reality.
One of our big issues, if there's a number one with a lot of attachments, it has to do with growth. And for example, impact fees and how they can be used.
Mm-hmm.
With growth, we need new police vehicles. We need another fire engine. We need, and there are some things we can't use impact fees for. And then when we do something like add a community center or another power line or another power station or whatever, we don't have any phase in time for maintenance and operation, which can also be a huge impact on our budgets. And some phase in time to accommodate those additional costs, help with police vehicles. Those are things that just make sense to us because we're in such a growth mode, and yet they're not possible under the current laws. And I did talk to the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and they indicated that they were doing a major study on it, maybe 2019, maybe 2020, but we're in the middle of these issues right now. Those aren't issues in some future when we grow. It's kind of like the warranty period on new homes. It's been reduced to 1 year. Well, with our soils, with blue clay and gypsum, sometimes those big problems like in Santa Clara don't occur for a couple of years, and yet those home buyers will have no warranty to help them. Should the soils testing not have been done well, should they not be well informed, should it have not been well constructed. Those kinds of issues you're going to see throughout that document I gave you, but they're growth issues where I think what we're talking about is reasonable. There are things like when they build schools, and yet they don't have to have hearings, they don't have to coordinate with the city. You know, those things that make sense. We do that. We have hearings, we listen. We pay attention to what the neighbors say. We can't always accommodate it, but we are listening. That cooperation between cities and schools and charter schools and private schools needs to be enhanced, and which isn't to restrict them. It's just to say there's a way to conduct ourselves in the public that maybe we don't always do. And which I've learned since I've been on the council that we need to do it. The public needs to be informed, and they need to have access to us. So you'll see a lot of growth issues in the document I gave you, but it's really just saying we really do need help on those issues because we're at one of the highest levels of growth again right now. So what was it, 1,200 permits so far this year?
Well, single family residential, we were about 480. That's the highest we've had.
Okay. So there we are again, just before the economic downturn. And can we be wiser this round in what those costs are and what we need to do? Then maybe we have them before through the legislature when things that sometimes occur at the legislature seem so counterintuitive to us at our level.
Yeah, hopefully as politicians, we learn from the past. Sometimes we're stupid enough that we don't learn. So hopefully we're better than that, right? Let me address a couple of things. So you bring up impact fees. Impact fees, the history of impact fees. I don't know. There's certain issues that have been bloodbaths in the legislature. Impact fees is one of those. The banks and versus credit unions. Fortunately, I missed out on that, but that was a bloodbath. School vouchers was another one, which I fortunately missed out on, and that was a bloodbath. Impact fees have taken the history of impact fees and working through how they can be used, why they can be used. It's been kind of a delicate process, sometimes using pitchforks and hammers, literally, and beating each other to death. And, but, because the city perspective, and like you're voicing, we've got to take care of the resources. We got to take care of the citizens. We need to have the resources to take care of those citizens. How can we do that? And if this huge influx of new growth comes in, you can handle a certain amount of growth and you can move forward. But if you get overwhelmed, then it's difficult to provide the services that the public wants. On the other hand, you have developers and builders that would prefer to have no impact fees, absolutely none. Although many, I don't know what the right term is, but I don't want to say legitimate, but many responsible developers and builders understand that there has to be some, and they recognize that, and I talk to those all the time. But there's that fine line on, there's been a negotiation. The negotiation has been that it's only being used for new construction, and then the city has to make up the M&O and take care of that. Doesn't mean that the law can't be changed, and we can certainly visit about it. I just want you to be aware that there's some history there that is not pleasant.
Well, and it isn't even that there should be an increase in impact fees necessarily. It might simply be that the latitude that we have where we most need to expend it.
Yeah.
We certainly need some latitude there. We can always use more money, but sometimes it's how we use the money.
Yeah. We can certainly, let's visit about it, and we can certainly involve some others and have some discussion about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And on the school issue, I'm very sensitive to that. As you know, I ran some legislation a couple of years ago and tried to move that forward, and got it as far as we could at the time. And I recognize that is still an issue, and I am on your side on that, quite frankly.
Well, I mean, I was on the other side of that issue, but I didn't understand it as an issue.
Yeah.
On this side of it, I understand it as an issue because those costs come back to the city for safety issues and a lot of other things, and there needs to be, and it does impact neighborhoods, and every time we impact a neighborhood, we hear about it.
Yes.
And we have to listen and pay attention to what's going on, but they don't have to.
So noted.
So we get the fallout from the neighbors are upset.
Yep.
But we're not the ones that are creating the issue. And if someone's creating an issue, they ought to be the ones that have to listen to it.
Yeah, I agree. You should have more say, if nothing else, in how that is done.
I don't know that it's so much say so, but there's a lot of coordination
Yes.
with the schools that when we're cut out of the process, it creates a lot of stress.
Yep. I agree. And I'll continue to work on that.
Thank you, Senator, so much for taking
thank
of your
you.
evening and coming down and sharing with us, and for your representative of us up in our legislative sessions. We've always felt that you have represented our wills. At least I have felt that. The years I've been here, certainly appreciate that. So thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you. And, and I recognize I live in another area, but I represent 3 counties, and quite frankly, I feel all 3 of those counties are like home. And I really appreciated the relationships we've been able to develop with you and many others in Washington County, and the opportunities to serve. And I'm one of those guys that I'm not a lifer. I'm not going to be there forever, but while I'm there, I want to do the very best I can. And that means interacting and working with you as well as the citizens of your fine community. So thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We hope Senator Vickers continues to represent this county. Because I can tell you from our perspective, as soon as he started representing our county, our city got a lot of attention, and his phone has always been open for our concerns and the comments we have, and he's so respected among the other legislators that it brings a big impact also when he listens to us.
That's true. All right, we'll move along to item 6A. which is a consideration to award the bid for the Fairway Drive Sewer Realignment Project. Public Works Director Mike Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. You actually approved this on your last meeting, but we had the error on the bid tabs. For the bidder, the winning bidder on this, we actually had the mobilization as $1,000 instead of $10,000. So we're bringing it back to the council.
I don't see a problem with that.
I don't think he wanted to do it for $9,000 less, but so we're bringing it back with the corrected amount at $76,825 to Royalty Enterprise.
So the maintain still was the low bid, if I recall
still
right,
the
with that, even with that number change. Council, any discussion with that?
Actually, the engineer was the low bid, but they wouldn't do it for that. So
We've kind of had that the last couple for some reason. Those engineers are kind of losing
they're
ground
getting
here.
sloppy.
So if there's no discussion, I'll look for a motion.
Well, since it's already been discussed, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the bid for the Fairway Drive Sewer Realignment Project to Royalty Enterprises in the amount of $76,825.
Motion by Councilman Belliston,
Second.
second by Councilwoman Granger.
Nice night.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
IBI.
Turek, aye. Item 6B is consideration to award the bid for the 1100 East Sewer Upgrade Project. Mr. Mike Shaw.
Okay, on this one, we actually advertised for bids. We opened bids on the 3rd of August. Low bid on this project was also Royalty Enterprise. We only received 2 bids on this project, but his bid came in at $354,195.
So have you discussed this before already with council?
No, this is.
No, this is, yeah, new.
Okay, so where is this? Because 1100 just got done.
Yeah, this is
Portion of
connecting basically from the new piece that got finished down to Telegraph.
Okay.
So this is adding a trunk line in to where the new development there, we can actually service that new development much better. with
So
this
is it a
sewer.
lateral trunk line or like a separate parallel trunk line? Or you're outside?
Yeah, there's not a trunk line that runs all the way up that road. It actually zigzags around through the development there. So this will go directly up the road and pull up.
So will we pull those that are existing, will tie into this as you come, or will they come back and tie in?
The existing will stay on the line that's there.
Okay.
This will handle all the new growth that's up in that.
So this is
area.
just for future, predominantly servicing future growth up in
Future
there.
growth, all the wide open area between 1100 East and Washington Parkway, as well as above the new finished 1100 East. They've got the sewer in there, and we'll tie into that one there. But it's just it's one of the projects that was, when we did our sewer master plans, one of the projects that came out with our modeling of our system, that was going to be undersized for the development that happens.
I just had a question on line 18. The engineer's estimate on that pipe, 10-inch pipe, was 89, and the bid came at 106. I just wondered why there was such a discrepancy there.
The engineer was low bid on this project again too, but it was just a price per foot. The engineer put in at $42 per price per foot on his estimate, and the contractor come in at $50. And then the next bid, the JP Excavating, his price was $67 a foot on that piping. So
A lot of linear footage, so $1 is going to make a big swing.
makes, yes.
So there's $27,000 difference between the engineer's estimate and royalty. Is that kind of a standard where, do they usually run low?
Not normally. Not normally. Normally the engineer's estimate is
Pretty
on the
close.
higher
That's
end.
what I was thinking.
And we don't advertise engineer's estimate. When we put a project out for bid, we don't allow the engineer estimate to go out because we want the contractors to do some work and do competitive bidding on the project. So we use that more for our budgeting purposes. So we don't want them to be low, but we don't want them too high either.
Thanks.
But we've seen prices increase quite a bit. And that's what we're seeing too, is getting bidders in on projects. It's smaller projects are just not interested in right now.
Would a project like this be more advantageous? I'm assuming we're not under pressure to put something like this in right now because that development really is a little ways down the road, isn't it? Would it
Not
be
too far.
advantageous to us to kind of back off some of these?
Well, I would have thought that, but we don't seem to be
Slowing down any.
Yeah. And so with that, we do have all these developments that have been approved up there on.
So they could come at any time because they have been approved,
Yeah,
so.
those Dean Perry parcels are gonna flow to this.
Yeah,
Line.
we've already been through preliminary plat. And
Yeah, that's what I
so they're
said.
Now,
getting
we-
ready to start turning dirt.
They will flow to this other line if we need it to, if this project isn't built, but we'll actually have a tie-in to where we can divert flows from one line to another, which is nice that you can have a little bit of redundancy in the wastewater system.
I would guess if we put it off, that the prices are just going to go up.
Possibly,
Possibly,
depends,
or
yeah.
Depends on how the market goes.
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
really
things
hate
could
to
slow
gamble
down and
right
get more
now on the
competitive,
market.
people. So,
We'd have to have another crash.
all right, any other discussion from the council? If not, I'll look for a motion.
I'll go ahead and motion that we award the bid for the 1100 East Sewer Upgrade Project to Royalty Enterprises as well, in the amount of $354,195.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston,
I'll second that.
second by Councilman Ivy.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Maybe I.
Turek, aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 6C, consideration to award a bid for the Veterans Park revitalization Phase 1. Barry Blake.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if we could have Craig just go through the
Oh,
numbers
Craig,
and then we'll give a
okay.
recommendation on that.
Craig's with the engineering that's been working with us on that, so.
And we thought this would be in your packet. It's being dropped in your packet now. So, but we'll go over the
Yes.
numbers here with the recommendation.
So Denise is uploading them right now. So we had two bids on this project for the Veterans Park. The first bid was for $850,193.38. And the second bid was $1,138,792.56. Those prices were extremely outrageous, I should say. We were very blown away when we had the two bidders. I'm not sure what our estimate was, more around the,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
probably not release the engineer's estimate. Our recommendation from staff is that the council reject the bids and then we'll move out to another bid process. That's why we'll hold on to the engineer's estimates.
Do you think one of the things that I heard kind of ripple around was the tight bidding timeline from announcement to bid time? Do you think that had much influence on the fact, number one, you didn't get many bidders, number two, the price?
I think that did affect it, because what we've been noticing, everyone's really busy. And if you definitely say, hey, we need it done this time frame, and you only have 45 days and it has to be done no matter what, people are going to say, all right, well, if I have to do that, I'm going to have to move another guy. So I'm going to throw more money at it and make it worth my while. We were really surprised at these prices. I mean, with all the effort that we put in to figure out where we were at on our budget and stuff like that, we were really surprised. And I really think it comes down to time frame.
Yeah, but a little bit of overtime shouldn't double the cost of the job.
It shouldn't. And I think that they were just throwing money at it.
Right.
I mean, there was, well, on the bid, you'll see there was mobilization was on one of them with $100,000 for like
Lights on.
3 pavilions. It just doesn't make sense. So I think if we have a longer bid time, it'll, have more time. I
Help with
think
that.
it will really help. So for this one, line.
Well, any discussion from the council?
Well, obviously, the resource is limited too, because we're using RAP tax to do this. And yeah, I think we need to rethink those priorities in this and how much we can do. And yeah, we're gonna have to rework it.
Do we need to, because the time frame to get it done is such an issue, do we need to look at, changing the timing of the?
I think that's something we can talk with our engineers and with our leisure services people on and look at that.
I certainly think that's, you're certainly not want to spend a whole lot of money just because you're trying to accommodate an event that happens in November. I mean, I think the council itself would say we can work around that as long as we can get a fair bid. So I think that's a good approach.
Kind of because they're used to a certain extent because we've got things a little tore up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I'll look for a motion from the council then.
I'll make a motion to reject the bid for the Veteran Parks elevation Phase 1.
Motion by Councilman Ivy,
I'll second it.
second by Councilman Nyson.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
IDI.
Turek, aye. Item 7 is our master fee schedule. This is an item that we discussed at our last meeting and now need to move forward onto the master fee schedule. It's consideration to approve the master fee schedule to amend the building plan review fees.
And Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I could, we realize this wasn't in the master fee schedule, so Denise has added this, so that's why it becomes now part of the master fee schedule at 45%. Of course, after our discussion with you, we would recommend from staff's point of view approval, and we're fine as we've worked with the Southern Utah Home Builders Association to make this effective if the council is so inclined to make it effective on September 12th. Now, the reason that they asked for that is because that is at the same time period that the reduction in the street impact fee occurs. And so they just wanted to coordinate, and I think that's a good sign of good faith. The Southern Utah Home Builders Association have been supportive of this, and so I'm comfortable at least making that recommendation if you want to for September 12th effective.
I'm just a little uncomfortable with the timing of the request and wondering why, since it's not, I don't know that it's today's emergency, why it didn't come through the regular budgeting process, and why we're getting it after the budget's been approved.
Well, it's probably not unusual if we have requests from departments, and that's why we bring them to work sessions for the council to review and decide if that's what they want to do or not what they want to do. And so this is a request, just we're seeing numbers, continued pressure on numbers with respect to building inspections, and especially as we've done our own study. And again, not everything lines up smoothly. It would have been nice if we could have maybe had all that study done beforehand, but we did our study to compare our inspections per inspector with other communities. We just completed that in the month of July. That indicated to us that yes, we're kind of, well, we're not a little bit, we're a lot. And it's important to us that we continue to maintain high quality inspections. Also, just the simple fact is that we continue to see strong numbers. The council can certainly wait, but it continues to put a pressure. And what we really liked is we've always felt the pressure on the expense side and just trying to make it work. This was a recommendation on our building department side, how to adjust those revenues to compensate. And that was part of the study. So we try to do everything exactly lineal, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And so that's the best kind of response I can give on that, is that we feel the need. That's why we brought it to the council work session. And, we try to catch as many as we can in the budget cycle, rate adjustments, but sometimes it's just not possible. We just don't get them all.
Any other discussion?
I think on this one that, nobody likes to have to adjust that plan review fee. I think most of the builders understand the reasoning why, because of the, we do have these guys trying to, we got a full plate, and we need to pick up another inspector to be able to respond to the building industry and not have them delayed in their construction process. So.
That was one of the things that came out in that discussion with the Home Builders Association, was the cost to those builders for days having to wait for those inspections. And so really by us being able to service them better is offsets the cost in reality.
Right.
So.
It's in the greater scheme of things, it's not a huge adjustment. So.
Well, I also want to just mention, because I think it's important that we do this, because we always get noted when our fees go up and we never get recognized when our fees go down. And within the last year, our building fees, both with water impact fee that's been adjusted downward, as well as transportation fee that's been adjusted downward, which will go into effect September 12th again, there's been an overall reduction of about $1,000. And this should represent only about a couple hundred on a permit.
And I just want to
I
clarify.
don't even know it's that high.
What's that?
I don't even think it's that high.
It wouldn't be that high under, that's kind of a worst case.
Right.
Sorry.
I just want to clarify, we mentioned 45%, but people that may be watching from home might not know that 45% of the total calculated building permit fee is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And the International Building Code Association, they recommend actually 65%. Yes. So we're still far below what the standard would be.
Any other discussion? I'll look for a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the master fee schedule to amend the building plan review fees effective September 12th.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Councilman Ivy, seconded by Councilwoman Granger.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Item 8 is plat vacation. Consideration to approve a plat vacation for the Jensen Minor for Lot 2 located approximately 900 north and 600 west. Applicant Stephen Howcroft.
Thank you. As stated, this is a request for approval of a vacation of a portion of the Jensen Minor subdivision. The Jensen Minor subdivision is basically where the Dixie Montessori School is, and it's the piece on the other side of the creek there. And so that's the piece highlighted in yellow that we're discussing. The applicant's wishing to vacate that said lot number 2. The request is in order to develop that area with new subdivision. The Jensen Minor was created in conjunction, as I stated, with Dixie Montessori School was built. But with that said, they always knew that there would come a time that they'd break this piece off, and today's the day. And they're requesting that to have lot 2 vacated. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the vacation of lot 2 from the final plat of the Jensen Minor subdivision and on to the City Council with the findings that you see in your report. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have on this application.
Questions for Drew?
It's separated by the gully, right?
Yes,
Seems,
that's why that line runs like it does.
Yeah.
Most
I'm
definitely.
surprised that they never came together in the first place.
Well, it was one big piece is what it was. And because the Dixie Montessori had to kind of break that off because of, again, how they do their finances and everything, they had to keep it on lot 1 because the value, if they took the whole chunk, was too much. So they had to create this Jensen Minor. Dixie Montessori held on to lot 1. The Jensen family held on to lot 2. And that's kind of how it came about. So the Jensens originally sold to the, the other piece to the Dixie Montessori.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of strange history to it, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. We could really get into a long discussion about it, but we don't.
No, we don't want to discuss that.
We've been there,
again
done
tonight.
that. And so that's kind of where we are tonight. So now I just will point out to you that there is a proposal coming to you soon on that lot number 2, at least on most of the big beefy part, but on that little, what I call the Oklahoma kind of finger out there, they're working on that panhandle of working with Brio, taking some of that we'll see at a future date as well, extending their boundaries on their PCD. So that you'll be seeing that coming, and then that's why we wanted to get this vacated so we can move forward on those future projects.
Any other discussions? If not, I'll look for a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion when we approve the plat vacation for Jensen Minor, lot 2, located approximately 900 north and 600 west.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston,
I'll second that.
second by Council Ivy.
Nice night.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Turek, aye. Item number 9, a plat amendment. Consideration to approve an amendment for the preliminary plat for Brio Phase 3, located approximately at Brio Parkway and Rialto Parkway. Applicant Reed Scow, Cole West.
Thank you. As stated, a request for an amended preliminary plat, and it's pretty simple. This one, I wish they'd all do this. All the lots you see that are colored yellow are being added to the preliminary plat. They were kind of held off for a future phase, but since they started getting into the design and the layout and the build, they realized, why don't we just put these lots in the preliminary plat now? And so that's simply what's coming before you, is to add those particular lots. I think, let's see, there's 4, 9, 11 lots that are being added onto this preliminary plat. So it's extending the boundaries of it, as you can see in the exhibit. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at their July 19th meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the amended preliminary plat for the Brio Phase 3 subdivision to the City Council, and that's based on the findings and subject to the conditions, which are the original conditions for the preliminary plat. We didn't want to change any of those. So I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on this proposal.
Any questions for Drew on this particular plat? pretty simple, just a good addition, as you say. It's kind of a nice one just to add on.
Yeah.
If there's no more discussion, I'll look for a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the amendment of the preliminary plat. Pardon me. Approve the amendment of the preliminary plat for Brio Phase 3, located at approximately Brio Parkway and Rialto Parkway.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilman Nyson.
Maybe I.
Granger, aye.
Bellis, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye. Item 10, public hearings. A public hearing for consideration to amend a portion of the Washington City Code, more specifically modifying regulations as found in Title IX zoning regulations, chapters 9-8A-6, 9-8B-6, and 9-8C-6 by adding a provision for attached awnings in rear yards. Applicant Robert Jensen.
Thank you. We'll just get started on this. This item went through the Planning Commission, was tabled. If you've read through the report, you saw there was the different proposals that came, and I'll kind of just briefly go through that. So that's why I just wanted to let you know that it was tabled at July 5th, came back on the 19th to fix that language. And so here it is. Basically, the report is a request from a business in the area and their attorney wishing to amend the city code for the purpose of having modifying regulations in the residential zones amended to allow for attached awnings to be within the rear yard setbacks. And those, as stated earlier, are specifically section 9-8A-6, 8B-6, and 8C-6, which are entitled modifying regulations. We'll be basically talking about the rear yards, and we'll just go right to there again. The original proposal just to give you briefly how codes can get changed, either the city can initiate it or a citizen can initiate it. And so after going through, he brought in that there would be letters E and F at the end of those chapters. After we talked about it, we thought it'd just be appropriate, the Planning Commission did, to change the rear yard, because that's what we were talking about, and specifically do like we did with the side yard awnings a couple years ago for the council members that were here, and kind of take that same process, or just, the way it was laid out is the format of it. And so that's what the Planning Commission decided to do. So currently the code reads for rear yard setbacks. I'll just briefly go through that. Rear yards, one-story private garages and other accessory buildings 20 feet or less in height, located at least 10 feet behind the main building, or, and this was a law that was changed a couple years back, and brought in this new part, said, or 3 feet behind the main building if open on all four sides other than the supporting post, may have a rear yard setback of 3 feet. And so that's how it reads now back there for anything in the rear yard. So the applicant proposed to come in and have that change to be able to attach things to the home. Again, because when you attach something, it becomes part of the primary structure. When it becomes part of the primary structure, then you have to meet whatever the stated setbacks are in that zone. Now, the city council a couple years ago, for those that were here, I think there's two of you that were probably part of that. They changed the awnings in the side yard and allowed those to be attached and go to a certain distance. And so this is coming back with this proposal from the applicant wanting to do so in the rear yards. And so that is what is before you right there. But I will just say staff feels the city, again, if you noticed in the report, I had a recommendation of no recommendation. I didn't go denial, or I didn't write approval, and I told the applicant I'd do that. Not really so in favor, because I feel we have sufficient in the city codes right now, but staff's also concerned about too much coverage for residential lots. Will take its toll on aesthetics within the community, and open spaces surround the homes within our community. Also, staff feels very strongly about two particular items that were left off of, I feel, the recommendation, and I have that opportunity to do so. It's what I'm taking at this time. And that being said, I still feel very strongly that a 6-foot-high masonry wall should be along, and sorry, that should not be a side. It should be the rear property line adjacent to the shade structure. And number two, before installation of any accessory shade structure, approval by the community development director or his or her assignee will be obtained as to the materials, location, and attachment to the main building. These two items, again, I feel are very consistent with what we have in the side yard ordinance, allowing for those awnings that were granted by the city council a while back. But with that said, the Planning Commission in their meeting recommended approval of an amendment to the Washington City Code, Title 9, Chapters 8A, 8B, and 8C, specifically Section 6, titled Modifying Regulations, adding the provisions for attached awnings in the rear yard onto you, the City Council, and the proposed verbiage is basically as follows, and it changed the whole thing, but I'm just focusing in on number 2. Again, number 1 stays with the original paragraph that was there, and we're adding an item 2. And here's what the Planning Commission wished to pass on to you is that number 2, 1-story attached accessory shade structures open on 3 sides may be located in the rear yard area to within 3 feet at the furthest projection of the rear property line, subject to the following conditions and restrictions. The shade structure roof and support columns must be fire rated and built of fire resistant materials in compliance with the International Residential Code and the International Fire Code. B, the shade structure shall not be built higher than the existing roof line that it abuts. And where there is no existing 1-story roof line, we say that in case there's a 2-story building there, it shall, sorry, let me turn my page, not exceed 12 feet in height. Number C, or item C, on corner lots, the required 20-foot front yard setback will be maintained on both street frontages. And D, the shade structure, along with any other accessory structures located in the rear yard, shall not cover more than 25% of the rear yard area. Now, this is already in your code, this last one. We just want to make sure that when people see it, because sometimes they don't know that in the supplementary and qualifying section of our code, there's some other standards, and we have this issue a lot. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had it in here, that they understand that, you know, this again is just pointing out that it's already in the code, this number D, but it's a good place to put it right here. So when they do follow these standards, they know they're limited to the 25%. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have and on this particular proposal.
There was a project that kind of caused this to come to the forefront, right?
Yes, there was an issue that a particular property owner who had work done by a particular awning company got cited because somebody wondered how they could put such a big awning back there, because they wanted to do one a couple years before and were told what the rules were. But so this one was done without requiring the building permit. They were cited. I don't know what happened in the court. I've been trying to get up to talk to Shelley. Maybe the applicant tell us what came of that. But they were cited, and I think they appeared in our court, and I'm not sure where it
We require a
was.
building permit for when these go in, correct?
Anytime you attach anything to a home, even if it's under 200 square feet, there's always this thing, well, if I keep anything under 200 square feet, I can just be doing all these things. But actually the code reads when you attach anything to the primary structure, because you're attaching to those walls and, you know, of which are supporting walls, they want you to have a building permit. Now, again, it's based on what it is and the size of it, and that's how your building permit, you know, can either be a $50 building permit or a $500 building permit or whatever it may be, based on how much of the area and what it is that you're actually adding on to those walls.
So like this other provision that says shall not cover more than 25% of the rear yard area, that we already have in it, we're restating it. It doesn't need to be restated, that we also say, hey, look, it does require a permit.
Well, we could probably add that,
Because
you know, on these.
stuff like that, you know, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
the drill, it happens a fair amount.
It actually does. And you know, it's like I told the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago, we have, unfortunately, there's hundreds, and I'm not being sarcastic when I say hundreds, I'm being probably conservative out there in our city that, again, we're not supposed to be out looking, but I do know they're there, and that, you know, that are literally out there that have done this without any permits and not following the current code as it is.
What's the setback space in a backyard from?
Depending on what zone you're in, it changes. I have anywhere from 10, 20, or 30 in the 3 main zones. That's our, you know, our R1, 6, and 8 it's a 10 foot. And then as soon as you hit an R110, it's 20 foot all the way up till you get to the residential agricultural 1 acre, then it goes to 30.
It almost seems like if you're 3 feet, if you can be within or less than 3 feet or more than 3 feet, that you're almost always going to be more than 25% if you're getting that close to the back.
Well, it depends on how much of the back of the home you're covering is what it comes in. So you may only go outside that sliding glass door or that back door to go out. You may only be putting an awning that's X amount of feet out, you know, and some of them, if it's a 10-foot backyard, it's going to only be a 7-foot awning, but it could end up being only 10 feet wide or whatever, depending on.
It could end up being 27-foot awning.
It could be. If you have a big enough yard, it could be a 20-foot awning out by 27 wide. It all depends on how big your backyard is.
As long as it's not bigger than 25%.
As long as it doesn't take more than, and that's where it's fair on a small lot versus a big lot. It's fair across the consistency that you still, everybody's based on the percentage. You know, nobody can have more than 25%. My backyard's smaller than yours, but my awning's going to be smaller than
This
yours.
seems to me really close to that back wall.
In some cases, it will be. Now, we did finally have to come to the conclusion in the discussions that this is not everybody's going to be able to do this, just because there will be certain situations that it's not going to be, you know, they're going to say, why would I put up a 7-foot, you know, awning? That's not that far. Somebody may want to. All that's in it going to end up being is like an elaborated, you know, those window ones that they used to put over your window and just for that. And some of them may be like that. But again, we're not going to be able to cover everybody. This will just give opportunity is what their proposal's for.
You said that this change needs to be brought by a citizen. Does that mean a citizen?
No,
of
it
Washington
did.
City?
It was brought by, actually, it wasn't brought by a citizen of Washington. You know, to my knowledge, I don't know if Mr. Jensen's a citizen of Washington, but it was the company he represents. They applied for this. So
when you say
anybody
it
can
has to be
apply.
brought by a citizen.
Well, no, I was just saying it can
The
be,
city can bring forward an ordinance.
or somebody can bring forth and ask for an ordinance to be changed if they want to.
On the setback, whether it's 3 or 10 feet, I know that you've got your vertical beams and then the awning extends beyond. Is it the closest point to the?
It's that furthest point. So if again, let's get back to that example we're using. If it's 7 feet and they want a foot overhang, that post and the beam is going to be back at 8 feet, you know, I mean, at 4 feet off of the back property line, so that the foot out there is at the 3 foot. That's how we went with the previous one that we did. It's just the farthest projection, we said. So that means you could cantilever out 4 feet or not cantilever at all. It's just that the farthest point can be no closer. That's why we just decided we're not going to get into how much eave you can have, et cetera. We just, in the side yard one, we just said, here's as far as you can go with whatever you're building, you know, so whether it's the eave or the post and the eave combined, and so I like that language to leave it at that, just that's the farthest point.
So I know that the homeowner, property owner is responsible for their own water, the runoff from the eave or their home. 3 feet, does that allow enough room to dissipate the water so that it doesn't cause erosion for maybe somebody that's a lower elevation?
Well, I hate to say it this way, but that homeowner is responsible for how that water comes off. So they may have to be putting a gutter on there and not allowing it to come and just, you know, beat on the ground below it. If they're responsible to make sure they're not going to create a problem for their neighbor, and it may end up being a gutter, and that you would be happy to hear in your personal profession there. So I see and that's what it would be. So then the gutter would be the farthest projection, which could not be closer than 3 feet. So does that help that?
It does. It does. And when I listened to this as it came through Planning Commission, I know that the one thought that I had was that we already have a code in place. And so I wanted to hear or see something as to why we needed to change it. And that's just where I'm at. You know, I understand that there's, you know, with how does it spend this summer, we need shade, we need awnings. I totally understand that. But I also know that our code, as I read it, seemed to make sense. So as we go forward, I'd like to hear some real definitive reasons as to why we should consider a change, because the code's in place.
That's why I hope, you know, we'll of course have the opportunity to hear from the applicant and see what he has to say, you know, for you folks. And I'll just, if there's any questions for me though,
When you take a neutral position,
be careful. You're going to go ahead.
is it that you could actually, it'd be okay to change the ordinance then? Or you're a little bit hesitant?
That depends on, and I'm not trying to get out of that, but believe me, there's times that I don't want the ordinance to change, but I won't recommend denial because I want to give people the fair opportunity. You know, not that, you know, that just because I say denial, that it should just be slammed with a gavel and it's no. I don't mean that. You know, I'm not trying to be arrogant in any way, but there's times that I say I'll let them give their day and, you know, before the group that be, and let them, and you know, like I say, this one I feel, you know, like I said in my report, I feel like we have sufficient. I understand the point about the attachment, and that does help, you know, and that's the only thing. And plus, in this case, it's still 25% of the yard being, you know, that's all they can do regardless. And I will have to be honest, because that's just what I'm trying to be, is that I don't mind this one coming for one reason. Because when we changed it to this one that says it can be 3 feet behind and open on all 4 sides, we didn't have this other criterion here. About the fire resistant, fire rated, all those other things weren't thought about when we did the one previous. And that, you know, and that's the little warm and fuzzy that I may have because of no denial, is that I thought, you know, maybe it might be okay. But again, I'm still torn because I think we do have enough, and we could go back and fix our one we have now and just add the fire rated you know, that kind of thing to it.
That was kind of my question, Drew, also as a follow-up, is what's the logistics to rewrite our code if we consider this? It seems like it would affect some other things also.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I just took a wrong turn in my thought, and now I'm kind of lost. What can you explain?
Well, I just want to make sure that if we consider this, that it doesn't that our code still is viable, and that it can be done in a way that, you know, that's going to make sense and it's going to work for the homeowner and everything. I mean,
I think he's asking, we're not opening the floodgates, are we?
Well, that's my concern that I've said from all along, is I think, because, you know, when you do, it's like when you know, we talked about this staff developer this morning, not this, but the analogy of the camel putting the nose in the door, you know, once, and then if we just keep letting him kind of come in a little farther and a little farther, that's my worry, is that I've seen this happen in some communities, that all of a sudden, then someone's going to come and say, well, 25% just isn't enough. I think we ought to go 35%. And then years later, it'll be something, and before we know it, we're giving up 75% of the backyard and the side yard, and it's all covered, and we've lost our open feel, you know, to our neighbors, and that aesthetic pleasingness. And that's my fear. It always is. And people say, well, that'll never happen. Well, unfortunately, I've seen it happen, and there's communities that can tell you it's happened to them over time.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Currently in ordinance, we can put one on the side yard and encroach in the setback. We can put a freestanding one in the backyard in the setback. But if we attach it to the house, it has to be within the pad.
Because it's part of the primary structure, and that's just how the code reads.
So what we're doing is we're adding the provision that says we can attach it to the house but extend into the setback.
Yes.
That's all we're really adding.
Yeah, but it has to be open on all, you know, and again, this gets that back to my fear, is that sometimes when we create these, and people have done them and we've seen it, someone will come in and say, well, it'd sure be nice. I can pick up some extra square footage. I'll just slap some walls in. I'm not saying it, you know, but those are the things that kind of do happen. And then it becomes livable, and then it's boom, you're right there at 3 feet.
Oh,
and
I understand, but a lot of these lots aren't deep enough.
No.
So you've got a house that you don't have a patio, and the only way you're going to get a patio is to go put an awning on it, right? But what we're saying is you can't have an awning that's part of your house that actually covers the doorway and keeps water out of your door. You got to set it off into your setback. But to me, it makes a heck of a lot
or use
more
gutters,
sense.
and there's that chance of water could come through. Like I say, if you did it right with the existing thing, you could cover that, but you're going to have to rely heavily on gutters.
Well, I've seen the freestanding awnings, and I've seen the ones that are attached to the building, whether it's up on the roof or if it attaches to the fascia or it's under the fascia. They look nice. They're a good connection, and I actually like the idea of an awning being stabilized by the house. I mean, you know, they do, the aluminum is good and they're structurally sound, but
So I know some of them are engineered, some aren't engineered. right? And I guess the applicant will be here and we can discuss that, but you know, when building a house, I've got to design that house to 115-mile-an-hour wind loads, and I know some awnings are designed to a heavy wind load. You know, I think there ought to be a permit process for it, and it needs to be designed to, you know, building codes that we have to design a home to. If you're going to attach to it,
Exactly.
you know, then you need to be subject to that. So,
And again, that's where I feel just
but I
that, you
do
know,
think we need to allow in provision to be able to attach to a house and extend into that setback.
Any other discussion for Drew? If not, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open our public hearing for any of those that wish to come up and speak. Just remind you, as you come up, if you would please give your name for the record so we know who you are, and then go ahead.
I'm Robert Jensen, the applicant, and I just want to say you have, I think, perfectly set the stage, asking exactly the key questions. And I'd like to suggest as we start that the amendment you're looking at right now, if it's not what you like, we can tweak it, we can fix it. But it's a critical issue. It's designed to improve your property values in every way. And you cannot come up with, maybe it's not a good idea to challenge you, but I don't think you can come up with something we can't easily fix. We've seen the Planning Commission spent incredible amounts of time, and I want to thank Washington City for the reception that they've given. Drew Ellerman spent some considerable time with me before we even looked at this, going through the ordinances, looking at the issues, and it looks like you're zeroed in on a lot of those. We came before the Planning Commission July 5th. We spent no less than 2 hours just going back and forth, asking the questions that you're looking at, taking notes on why this issue, going back and forth. It was tabled. Drew Ellerman, again, took some considerable time batting things around, taking all of the issues, and we came back before the Planning Commission on July 19th. Again, we spent more than 2 hours on this issue. And what we did was put what you've got up on the screen right now, number 2, and we went through issue by issue. There were more issues than this, and we debated, went back and forth. The commission was very cordial. I think the public hearing was over 3 times, and they still let me come back. And we went back and forth over it, and I think what you've got here is good. Not that you can't tweak it if you feel the need to. But let me show you a couple of things that I think are very, very important. First of all, I would just say that you live in, I hope you know, the hottest region in this state. Shade is a huge commodity. Awnings, 95% of them are designed to attach. They're meant to attach. I appreciate Commissioner Ivy's comment that the stability of an awning goes up quickly as soon as you attach that along a house instead of 2 posts. It also removes 2 posts. So the functionality, that's another reason why 95% of the awnings are really made to attach. But it's one of the best ways to improve the value of your yard, to improve the livability of your yard, and to draw people out of their homes to enjoy the environment a little bit more. Commissioner Ivy, I think, very astutely pointed out that it's important that we not create ordinances for the sake of creating ordinances. It's important that we not create something that we don't need. And as Commissioner Bellison pointed out, and Mr. Ellerman recognized, there's a hole in your ordinances right now. Look at, I think I can just do this. I can put it on the overhead if you want. Actually,
Can you facilitate
put
that?
it on the overhead?
I think you can she'll turn the Elmo right there on if you want to slip it right under.
So what you have here is you have a garage ordinance, you have an accessory building ordinance, but you have no attached awning ordinance. Watch what happens. So this is your residence with a 30-foot setback. Okay? Your ordinance currently allows you to build a garage in a 30-foot setback, and it really does it actually without restriction. You could build it clear across the backyard. Only there is a provision in your ordinance right now that says you can't be more than 25%. We're keeping that. That's a restriction on whatever you build in your yard. It can't cover more than, it can't shade the yard more than 25%. But you can build a garage. Now notice here, a garage, because it's combustible, has to be 10 feet behind the home. But it can be built within 3 feet of the back of the rear line and the side line. In fact, the awning, the overreach, can extend to the property line right now. You have to put a rain gutter, you have to catch your water, you have to deal with your water, so it's not bothering your neighbor. But a garage can go, in your current ordinance, can go to the property line. Okay? If we go to your next subset of your ordinance, this is a detached accessory building. Instead of a 10-foot setback here, it's a 3-foot setback. So now, I don't mean setback. 10 feet behind the home is for a garage, 3 feet behind the home for a accessory building. But the accessory building can still go within 3 feet of the fence with an overhang reaching to the property line. Okay, so you're allowing some great latitude for garages and for detached accessory buildings. Detached garages, detached accessory buildings. Look what happens when I want to build an awning on my home. I can build an awning, but it cannot reach into the 30-foot setback. So it makes for a long, narrow awning. And you've got to ask yourself, what's the point?
If I have an attached garage, I can't go into the setback.
You can't attach a garage. But yes, that's right. You're right.
If it's detached, that's why you have those separate rules, right? If it's detached, if it's a certain part away, you can go into the setback. But if it's attached to my house, I can't go into the setback.
That's exactly right.
And so that's why it currently is saying, if it's an attached awning, it can't go into the setback.
That's exactly right. Now,
because it becomes part of the main structure.
And why does a detached garage have to be separate from the home? Why does a detached accessory building have to be separate from the home? The issue is a combustibility issue, and we don't want that combustibility to be back in that setback area. The only thing I can come up with, the only thing I can see.
No, it's a combustibility issue threatening the main structure of the house.
Okay. So we move it away from the home.
Well, that's
right?
why you have a distance away from the house.
That's right. Now, what if the structure is a simple shade structure, just a roof, and it's made 100% out of non-combustible materials? As Mr. Elliman pointed out, the second we attach anything to the home, the definition of that structure immediately becomes house and cannot go back into the setback area. So look at the unintended effect of the ordinance that you currently have. I can build an awning that is 3 feet behind my house. It's called an accessory building. And I can go clear back to the back wall. I can overlap the two structures. But if I attach that at any point, all of a sudden I've got to pull it back out of the rear yard, and it can only be in that narrow space between the house and the rear setback. When you draw it a little bit differently, if we can do a real awning, we can have two structures that overlap each other. So there's some unintended consequences. As we look at that, what we're suggesting is that we allow a simple attachment. Only when it is under certain conditions, and the primary one being that it's non-combustible. And if we meet that requirement, then let's allow that livability, which often you want right immediately behind your home, right immediately on your patio and adjacent areas. But let's keep it very rigid. Let's keep it very tight. Let's not let it go beyond what we let go with a garage. Let's not let it go beyond what we let go with an awning, as we'll allow, we allow them to overlap right now. Let's.
I'm not arguing with you.
Go ahead.
I understand where you're going with it. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, the combustibility issue it's not a combustible issue until you get within 5 feet of the property line. And then you have to start doing things in 3 feet, you have to do more. So you could do it out of a wood trellis off your house attached into that setback area, assuming we approve it.
If you amend the ordinance.
If we amend the
Okay.
ordinance, it's not a non-combustible or combustible. I mean, if we wanted to do it out of wood beams, rough sawn beams
Good.
or something, we could
Good.
do that.
Well, so it's drafted right now with a non-combustible requirement. If you want to take that out so that you could do wood awnings, I'm back away from that issue because I'm not really prepared to deal with the fire marshal and what might come. And I assume there's some reason why that garage can't get closer than 10 feet. I haven't researched what it is. I assume there's some reason why the accessory building that has to be open on all 4 sides can get closer. And honestly, all awnings that are being built by, I shouldn't say all awnings, awnings that are built by awning companies are typically made out of steel and aluminum and non-combustible materials, and they're typically made to attach to the building. So
See, I'd rather than get into combustible, non-combustible,
Fabulous.
aluminum, whatever else, I would rather just say subject to building code and engineering and permit.
and I wouldn't fight you on that one bit. I think that'd be fabulous.
Is there a definition of an awning?
Yes. So can I put the proposed ordinance back up? That's it. Thank you. That's a great point. And when we proposed the statute, we put in a definition of an awning. And as Mr. Elliman revised it, he took out the definition. And honestly, I appreciated the revision. It simplified it greatly, because what we said was we defined an attached awning as something that was attached. It just meets the requirements that you're seeing right here in paragraph 2. It's a structure that is attached. It's a structure that is, when we said non-combustible, and it has certain definitions. So the ordinance itself is defining and scoping what
It can't have walls, though.
That's correct. So let's walk through the requirements, and I want to show you that you've already asked almost all the key questions, raised them, and they're right here. So if you look at number 2, do you have that in front of your screen? Is that what it is? Okay. So number 2 is a 1-story attached accessory shade structure. So we're limiting its height to start with. Open on 3 sides. The side that would be closed would be the side it attaches to a home. So all of a sudden that's closed. May be located in the rear yard to within 3 feet of the furthest projection of the rear property line. Notice what we did there, Commissioner Ivey. You were talking about the structure that reaches to the property line. A garage can go to the property line. An accessory building can go to the a property line. But the staff said we're not really too comfortable with that, and suggested maybe we would go back and change the garage and the accessory building ordinance to match it, but they like the idea that we're pulling this back, not just the posts, but the overhang. The furthest reaching part has to be at least 3 feet from the property line. So the ordinance is allowing it in a very restricted fashion of the rear property line, subject to the following conditions. Now, the first condition, as Commissioner Bellison points out, is being fire rated, fire resistant materials. Everything has to be steel. Well, it has to be fire rated according to, you'll notice it says there the residential code.
I like the fact that you promoted us.
That's the problem.
Say it again.
And you keep calling us commissioner.
I'm
It's a
sorry.
promotion.
Council member.
What
I'm
he's saying,
trying.
it's-
I'm trying to.
What he's saying, it's a lot nicer than what he's been called
Yeah.
before.
I've been called a lot
As-
worse.
You know what? As President Bellison points out,
There we go.
A
Whatever you want.
Yeah, A deals with the fire rating. I'm not going to go over that anymore. If you have questions, I'd be happy to look at it. But B, the shade structure should not be built higher. We're worried about them becoming too ominous. We're worried about, so we put limitations on it, and I'll show you some pictures on that. I hate to go back and forth. That's a pain. So I'll come back to B, and I'll show you some pictures, I think, of some awnings that, or an awning, I think, that's illustrative, and we'll show you some of those points in B. But now C obviously is a corner lot. Okay, Mr. Ellerman had some great points there. When we drafted our initial version, all we did was copy what you do with garages, and we said, I don't want to mess with your ordinance. Let's do it your way. And we spelled it out. You'll do this, 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 and this. It's the same elements as the garage, same elements as the accessory building. And the Planning Commission said, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. So we dropped some of it. We added additional items, and we considered each of them pretty aggressively. So on D, the shade structure, along with any other accessory structure located in the near yard shall, I don't know who capitalized the word not, and if you want to put that in your ordinance, that's fabulous, but it will not cover more than 25% of the rear yard area. Now, Mr. Ellerman says it's important that we not let the camel get his nose in the tent, and because then it just gets out of hand. What I want you to see in this ordinance is that the camel's being locked down rigidly, more strictly than the ordinance that you have for garages, more strictly than the ordinance that you have for accessory buildings. And it's also incorporating and reminding the builders of this 25% rear yard item. Let me stop now and let me go back and look at some of the issues that aren't in here. Some of the issues that that Mr. Ellerman just brought up, and also that the Planning Commission looked at. The first one was.
He brought it up here.
Really? Well, I'm not taking credit for the originality of it. The reason I say it, I'm just paraphrasing.
The first time I've ever heard it, it was Mr. Ellerman, president. All right. So the Planning Commission looked at a 6-foot block wall. And of course, Mr. Ellerman here is saying, we'd like to have a 6-foot block wall. Let me tell you the items that encourage the Planning Commission to pull the wall issue out altogether. Number one is a suggestion that if we want a wall ordinance, we should create a wall ordinance that applies across the board to the city. Number two is that if the subdivider, wants to establish a certain look in their subdivision, then the subdivision should be allowed to establish that certain look in their subdivision. Number three was that if you have a view lot and you have an uneven lot that slopes down, a block wall is not going to do anything to protect the view of the awning that's up here. Vice versa, if I have a lot that's sloped up dramatically, the block wall is not going to really help for the view down below. And then I think it was Commissioner Hardman that said he had visited a place in Brookwood where he had gone up and there had been a really nice awning that went across the whole back of the home, still only covered, I assume, 25% of the backyard. And he had a wrought iron fence. And he said the view was spectacular. What you saw was, he said, it was gorgeous. I loved it. Another thing that was brought up is that if someone has a pool, they're going to have patio furniture. They're going to have lots of kids. They're going to have lots of family. Do we require a block wall? We don't. But if we have an awning where we allow people to come out with a patio and same sort of setting, but we don't have a block wall requirement. So we're creating inconsistencies. And the idea was, let's let that be governed by, if we want an ordinance, let's create it separately. Let's let it be governed by the subdivisions. The next item was that I think was considered pretty heavily by the Planning Commission was and Mr. Ellerman brought it up as well, was that we'd like to have the community development director kind of have to give a second approval of this. It was brought up, I think, by council member Bellison that already a permit is required. In fact, maybe let's put a provision in here that says it requires a permit. You'd be putting that in 30 different ordinances. It's already required, but if you want to put it in, that's fine. But a building permit requires you to present plans and details for the materials and the items that you're going to be using and show engineering. All awnings are required to be engineered. And so the question is, do we want a second check? And the Planning Commission, as they looked at this, said, number one, materials. That's already addressed right here in 2BA, where it describes the materials that you're going to be using. The location of it is addressed in part in 2D, where it says, hey, it can't be more than 25% of your backyard. We've already got some limitations. And then the attachment, of course, is an engineering issue. You can't attach things to your home for fun. Well, you can attach them for fun, but they do have to be properly built and they need to be properly engineered. The Planning Commission came back on that issue and said, well, hey, that's fine if we really want that in there. Let's just put that the community development director will do a quick check and rubber stamp that all of those requirements are being met. And the question was, well, isn't that required by a building permit? And it is. So their decision was to take that issue out. So we've also addressed the issue of a building permit. And then finally, one of you mentioned that, are we opening the floodgates? Right now, I would suggest that the way you're doing the garages, there's no floodgate. I don't know. The Planning Commission felt like that ordinance isn't as tight as they would like to see it. The way you're performing and allowing the accessory buildings, same thing, doesn't appear to be a floodgate. The Planning Commission felt like they'd like to see restrictions, something like this for that ordinance. But what we're doing right now is really nothing other than allowing that overlap to be solved and improved, really, with a simple attachment. And as soon as we attach, then we have to comply with these additional 4 requirements. I think it's a very solid, appropriate presentation. Honestly, I feel like the Planning Commission did a great job. They vetted it exceptionally well, put me through the ringer. It took an awful lot of time, but they put in the homework. Mr. Ellerman put in more than enough homework, and I think vetted it really well. I'd ask, is there any concern that you have with an attached awning? I think those concerns can be addressed. They've been addressed with the Planning Commission.
I was just kind of wondering what the motivation of this change. Is it just for one resident, or is it for
That's a great question. And thank you for the question. I remember you brought that up earlier. So that is part of the reason for it, but I would recommend that. So answer is yes, in part, but it's much, much bigger than that. As I work with a number of awning contractors, they're complaining about the same thing. As I look at ordinances throughout the state and in surrounding communities, they're allowing awnings to attach, sometimes in the front yard. Sometimes you made the change, I think Mr. Ellerman said it just a couple of years ago, on the side yard. It's appropriate to attach an awning. It makes it more stable. It makes it better. It's more aesthetic. In fact, if I have to unattach it, then I've got an odd connection. I've got an odd relationship there between the home and the awning, but I also have 2 additional posts. And if we're trying to arrange seating area, it makes it difficult. In direct answer to your question, I've got a number of awning contractors that are saying, please help us solve this problem. Attachment is key to a beautiful awning. It's key to strength. It's key to usability in the area, and it makes a great difference.
I agree with that. You know, I really do. I don't think I have a problem at all with the attachment idea. In fact, I've seen a lot of times where the posts that have to be there, they're right in the living area, and they create a little bit of a safety problem. But I just want to kind of brush with a broad stroke here, just to make sure we keep moving forward. I'm okay with the idea of an attachment. I like Councilman Belliston's idea of letting the building codes and engineering govern the awnings themselves. And I think a permit obviously needs to be required. I don't see a correlation between a block wall and an awning. And I would just add that, you know, I have seen and been around awnings for a long time. It kind of correlates with my business, and they're very nicely done. They're strong. They're structurally sound. I do see them as an improvement to the property. The only thing that I'm having a little bit of problem with, and I keep thinking that the 25% could govern this in most situations, but it's just to the property line. You know, I know that if you have a smaller yard and you got 25%, then, you know, I understand how that ratio would work. But the only discussion that I would really like to have for me personally is just how close to the backyard. That's where I'm at.
Do you mean the back boundary?
The back property line. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that'll be a discussion that we could have as a council during discussion time.
So, can I drop that and show you a picture?
Certainly, as long as it's a quick picture.
This picture is a fast picture.
I think the council has a pretty good idea of what you painted here, so I think we all understand things pretty well that you presented. You've done a great job with that.
I would point out while that's coming up, Councilman Ivy, that commonly we're seeing cities throughout the state adopt a 30% or a 1/3 use of their backyard. 25% is a little bit more conservative and I think appropriate. The balance you've got there is, do we want to have grass and trees and open space, which is beautiful, or do we want to have open space maybe that part of the year is a little bit more usable by the family with people in it? And it's a little bit of a balance.
You're not going to
there.
come back and ask for 30%, are you?
I actually pushed the planning commission for 30, and they smiled and they ignored me. This is an awning that is really the one in question, Commissioner Nyssen. This is an awning that violates your current ordinance because these pillars are in the backyard, the setback. This could be remedied by coming in with a saw. It'd have to be a diamond blade saw because it's metal, and cutting 1 inch of this structure away from the home, and then adding a column on each side of that, and then it wouldn't violate your statute, but ordinance. But because it connects, I have to move these columns back 1.5 feet. So,
Is this the one that's caused the problems?
This is a good example of what the awning companies are saying. Yes, this is the one that got me hired.
Drove the discussion.
Okay.
Initiated the
There
discussion.
you go.
Initiated my discussion, and it's been a fascinating ride, actually. Here's the same awning. This is an exceptionally large backyard. Over here, there's a pool, and a pool area. And, oh, I've got them. Well, and then over to this way, there's more backyard, really nice grass area. But you'll notice that with this awning, they're seating and it's nice, it's appropriate. So
So is it safe to say if this was the one that caused some issues, it was built without a permit?
This, in answer
Because we
to
wouldn't
Mr.
give it a
Elliman's
permit for it.
question earlier, this was built without a permit. That's been before your city prosecutor, and there's been fines paid. And the question now is, okay, let's go rectify it with the city.
No,
But of course, the city
But it was brought up.
can't issue a
These
building
get built
permit.
on a regular basis without a permit, and with the wind loads and things that we have to design to.
So two things there. Number one, it has to be permitted. That's fair. And it's appropriate to put it in this ordinance. We didn't put it in, and I told the planning commission, we didn't put it in because I mirrored your ordinance. The planning commission didn't feel the need to put it in
No,
because
I think
it's
a lot of
already in
people
there.
Understand, if I'm building a building, or if I'm building a garage,
Absolutely.
if I'm building a structure, there has to be one, but a lot of people look at that and think, geez, that's just a trellis, or that's just a shade,
Right.
or that's just an awning, I
Right.
don't need to go through the hassle, but you really do.
Good. So two issues there. Number one, not a bad idea to put that language in there that you need to get a building permit. Yeah, you know, put a big sign, billboard on the I-15 as well.
I think it just needs,
But-
it
but
ought to
then-
be restated in that.
But
system.
then number two,
protection.
what that does, it's not just a building permit, but with a building permit, you get city inspection, you get city,
Correct.
well, no, first you get city approval, then you get city inspection and review, but you also get, and to your earlier point, you get the opportunity to verify that there's engineering on this structure, that not only engineering on the structure, but if it's a retrofit, that
That they've looked at the existing house to make sure. it's-
the existing house likewise needs to be built or refurbished to match the strength of that structure. So again, really, thank you for your time. I appreciate this, but we really appreciate your planning commission. There was a discussion at one point saying, hey, you know, let's just tell them we recommend these things and let's move it on. 4 hours, 2 hearings. And the comment was made, no, we're supposed to do our homework. The council expects us to do our homework and to get things right. Let's take the time to do it right. And I think when they finally voted, and you've got Commissioner Martinson and Commissioner Coates here, they're both still here. When they voted, they felt good about what was there because the homework was done in the ordinance. So thank you
They
for
do
your,
do a great
for your
job.
time.
We certainly
They do
appreciate
do a
the Planning
great job.
Commission's great group.
As did, I don't know that I've had a Drew Ellerman in other cities who would take the time with me and look at the issues and then go back and forth with the staff to make it work. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? We'd invite you to come on up. Seeing no one come forward, council, I'll look for a motion to close our public hearing.
So moved.
Motion to close the public hearing by Councilman Belliston,
Second, Beth?
second by Councilman Ivy.
Nice night.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Turek, aye. Item number 2 is a public hearing for consideration to approve a general plan amendment, request G-17-5, to add amended the general plan text, more specifically by adding a new category in the land use designation titled Planned Unit Development. Applicant, Washington City. I'm trying to make sure I get my right.
Okay, as stated, we're seeking to amend the general plan land use designation categories, adding a new one titled, as stated, Planned Unit Development as an option within those designations. This has been over some discussions about some properties that we've had proposed for some PUDs, and it came out of those discussions, as you as a council know real well, they just wanted some assurances. But and so we had some discussion in that and felt it might be appropriate to give it a general plan designation to give them some of those assurances, then they can move forward that direction. So this is really where this has come from, why this is before you tonight. The request will add another category as stated in the general plan land use designations in this, and I put it in the boxes because that's where it fits in those designations. If you've opened up your general plan, it'll just fall right in with those. The land use designation called, the zones that's allowed in it, the typical densities, and then the policy intent. And that just fits in all those other categories. The Planning Commission reviewed this at their July 19th meeting. They unanimously recommended approval of G-17-05, amending the general plan, Chapter 2, Land Use, Section 3, Land Use and Zoning, Table 2-1, Land Use Designations, adding the new category, Planned Unit Development. And that is what's before you tonight. And again, I just put in there that the zones will be PUDR and PUDC. Those are coming to you as we review those. The Planning Commission will be seeing those real soon. They've actually seen them. They're just going through having their review of that. I hope to have it on a work session for you folks, probably either 2 weeks from tonight, just to kind of get an idea where that's at, and then let them do their input. And it might change a little bit, but we're basically going to have 5 PUD options, and 3 of them are residential and 2 of them will be commercial.
Is there a mixed PUD?
That's the mixed PUD is one of the commercial ones. That's what it'll be, a C, but it'll be classified mixed use.
So this in the general plan, do we even need to separate out CPUDR and PUDC? Because you mentioned in here, it kind of comes from the Nyson property, but the Nyson property, part of it's PUD residential, part of it's PUD commercial. So do we then split that?
Oh, no, in the general plan, we won't. No, the general plan will just be a PUD.
It'll just say
this,
PUD
the
on
zones,
that overall
yeah,
zone.
the zoning, like if I open up the general plan right now and I went under the medium density category, it would say the zones in there are my R2, my R16, my R18. That's all that zoning means. That's the zones will be allowed to be applied for in that designation. That's all that's saying. And so we're just going to have those, and there's 5 different ones, but they're either going to be in, because when I wrote them up, I have them in PUD, R. There's 3 different ones in the PUDR.
So the general plan will just be PUD.
PUD period.
And then the individual zones will be under what are available under the general plan.
And I understand that, but in this, we're calling it 2 separate ones.
No.
It's just PUD. That's the zones you can apply for, which actually will have 5 zones eventually in there.
Here,
Correct?
let me, can I give you an example? It'll probably help. Can you just put Elmo on again real quick?
I see where you're going. Once I explain this, it'll hopefully help.
I'm confused a lot.
No, I know where you're coming from. I can see.
Comes from riding without a helmet, buddy.
Oh, I wore my helmet the whole time. Don't worry about that. That's part of the problem. I still can't hear.
What?
Yeah.
See, here's what I took it from. So if you just, that's the table just says those land use. So when I go to the ag designated land, people can apply for an A20, they can apply for an A10, an A5, or an RA5. That's the zones they can apply for in that. So when we say PUD, R, or PUDC, that's the zones that they can apply for when they come for the zone change. That's all that's saying. And as I laid that out, those are the zones that are acceptable in there. That's why we're keeping it consistent.
So then why doesn't it say
PUD? The
okay.
designations.
All right.
It's going to be like
PUD mixed use will be under commercial. So we'll have PUD commercial, PUD mixed use under that one, and then we'll have PUD single family, PUD multifamily.
When they come in for the specific zone change, they'll hit. That's why I say it's going to be either a PUD, one of the 3 Rs, or one of the 2 Cs. When they come in for the zone change, that's the ones that are allowed. We're going to keep it a category. It'll just be PUD in the general plan designation.
But what if, like with the Nyson property, what if when they come in, what they need is a PUD mixed use zoning? Okay, because they're not completely sure where the commercial is going to be, where the residential is going to be. They're not zoning those separately. They need it appears to me, a mixed-use PUD zone.
There is one. That's part of, and again, when I say the PUD
But
R
when you
and
put it
C,
under commercial, then I'm thinking it's not mixed use, it's commercial.
well, that's what mixed use is mixed residential and commercial mixed together, but you call it, it fits under a commercial with the benefits of residential within that. Because it's the heavier, you always go with the heavier use on a zone. If you're going to do a mixed, you know, it's like if I was mixing industrial and commercial, I would call it industrial mixed use. You get all these industrial things, but then you can have a mixed use of some commercial added within that.
So
That's just, you always hit the heavier use when you classify it.
what's kind of, I guess, got me confused is on your left column there where it says, say, very low density.
Mhm.
That's where I would see it to say planned unit development, which is the way you have it. But in the zones, I would, in my mind, since we're going to have 5 zones, one would be PUDR, one will be PUD-M.
Multifamily. I could go back and
One
change. Yeah, if you
So-
want
so
you want me
that's
to
why-
add all
that's why-
5 of them, I have no problem. Like,
That's kind of what I was expecting, so that's why I got
So right here, you want to go with
confused.
PUD,
single family, PUD multifamily, PUD overnight, vacation rental, PUD mixed use, and PUD commercial.
Right.
That's what you'd, and then we can, I
That's what I
have no
anticipated
problem.
would happen, and then each of those will have its own under.
Oh, that's fine. We can, I can change that. You can see, I'll just take the R's out and call it PUD single family, PUD multifamily, PUD overnight, PUD mixed, and PUD commercial.
Right.
Does that help?
That works better for me.
Perfect. That's no problem. That's all I was just trying to say. I just condensed the 3 into the PUDRs and the,
And I know what
So-
I know what you were
yeah.
trying to do.
And I can,
I
it will
still
be a
think
lot
that-
clearer your way. I get that. That's
Yeah.
actually the more, that's come out, it'll be a lot easier for people to see that then. Instead of having to go to the zoning and see what's in the R and then they realize, oh, there's 3 different ones. We'll
Right,
just
well, so if we
call
do-
them out.
If we zone something PUD overnight rental, it's going to show up on our map, PUD OR, and they can easily go and see that rather than if it's a PUD R, which one's, then they
Which
got to go
one
back
is
and
it?
say which one's overnight, which one's not. And,
Yeah.
it just,
No, I
Cleans it up
totally
a
understand
little
what
bit
you're
for me.
saying, and it'll be real easy to go back and typo that over and put those 5 different ones in there.
It's nice to
No
see us
problem.
move forward.
Any other discussion for Drew?
Nope.
If not, this is a public hearing. We will open it up to the public. Again, remind you if you come forward, just to state your name for the record. Seeing no one come forward, I'll come back to the council for a motion to close our public hearing.
So moved.
Motion for closure by
Second.
Councilman Ivy, second by Councilwoman Granger.
Nice night.
Ellis and I.
Granger, aye.
IBI.
Turek, aye. Item 11, ordinances. Consideration to approve an ordinance granting general plan amendment request G-17-03 to change designation from medium density and low density to high density located at approximately 600 north, 1100 east. Applicant Kendall Turner.
Thank you. As stated, we are, the 2-week period has ended. And the first one is taking this 5.252 acre one for 17-03 going into the high density. I think all are familiar with this. Their hopes is to eventually have it zoned to R3. The Planning Commission reviewed it at their July 5th meeting. They unanimously recommended approval of G-1703 to amend the general plan land use as outlined to the high density designation. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have had in your 2-week time period.
Any questions for Drew? I wonder where Councilman Belliston ran off to. I guess we can hold for a minute if we want to hold a motion, and maybe we can make a motion and maybe hold a vote till he gets here. If someone would like to make a motion.
Oops, excuse me. I'd make a motion to approve an ordinance granting general plan amendment request G-17-03, change designation from medium density to low density to to high density located at 600 North, 1100 East.
A motion for approval by Councilman Ivy,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilman Nyson. We'll hold off for just a moment and let Councilman Belliston jump back in before we go ahead and vote.
This would be a good place for us to have an RDA in place, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You could time to play the Jeopardy music too right now.
Here comes Councilman Belliston. Councilman Belliston, we have a motion for approval on this particular ordinance to change.
Quick, I'm sorry.
To change. We've had a motion and a second, but we've been holding off for you to come back so we can vote. We'll go ahead and
What are we voting on?
this is our.
This is the high density piece up by
Changing from
Bluffview.
medium density and low density to a high density.
Okay, sorry. I didn't
Located
hear
out
the
kind of
motion.
on the north
For
side of
approval?
the
Yes.
turf farm. The motion is for approval.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Turek, aye. Item 11B is consideration to approve an ordinance granting general plan amendment request G-17-04 to change designation from high density to CC Community Commercial located at approximately 600 North, 1100 East. Same applicant, Kendall Turner.
Thank you. And as stated in the previous one, the 2-week holdover is complete. The item's ready for action. This is one where staff, if you notice, had a no recommendation again, had a few concerns on this one. So I just left it as a no recommendation. The Planning Commission held their public hearing and reviewed it. And at their July 5th meeting, they unanimously recommended approval of G-17-04, amending the general plan land use map as outlined to that community commercial designation.
Isn't the road part of the issue?
Yeah, the size of the road, especially to the south, the intersections, all those items being incorporated to that, just the vastness of it and the use of a potential RV storage facility again. But a lot of it has to do with the road, and especially as you come in from the south, where
'Cause it's
probably
only-
90% of the people will be coming from, and it's just that narrow
It's
road
only half done.
that we talked about.
Is there a solution to that? Has there,
Well, there is a solution, but I don't know if the developer would want to do that. It would be to
we don't
build
have,
the rest of the road out. That's a lot to ask, and but that would be a solution. At least one of them. But
we're going to pull RVs in, going 2 directions into that, on that road? Is that road even big enough for 2 RVs to pass each
But
other?
I wonder if they could pass.
depends on how
Sure
good
be
of a
tight.
driver and how wide or how far their mirrors got to stick out, I guess, to see sometimes down
That could
those.
be
But that's one of the Planning Commission concerns as well, is they looked at the width of the road, et cetera.
I think the applicant needs to resolve that problem.
So because I missed most of the discussion, it's, they want to go from a high density to community.
It's got, right now, it's three designations are running through the property, north-south.
Right.
You have, all 3 of them would be high density, medium density, and low density. If the high density is on the east side, would be on the right side of your screen, and then they just run through
Almost
until you get to
two-thirds,
low.
basically. It was
And I could bring those up on the map, but it's basically, and they just want to change all those into a community commercial designation. They want to have like basically a strip mall out on 1100 East, commercial, and then storage in the back. Which is the large part.
That area is residential area, and it was set aside for some high density, and I think it's a good. That's a good fit for the area. I'd be concerned with some open storage and.
That's right. You missed our public hearing
I
last
did, I'm
time.
sorry.
I just remembered that. Yeah.
Drew, one question that I had, and of course it isn't a general plan question, it comes more through the zoning process, but if it goes through to become RV storage, if I recall right, when we talked about storage units, our ordinance requires a block wall to be around those units to secure that. Is that correct?
Yeah. If they abut an agricultural or a residential zone, they have to put solid block wall on all of those zones that they would
Zones.
abut that are different,
Or they
than the
about
commercial.
a different,
So in essence, 3, it'd be the way that zigzags down over all along the west and the south would have to
would
be
require
a block wall.
Block wall.
Yeah. Any development, any of the commercial developments, you know, it's
Would
just, it would be a
require that
CUP.
transition from-
Yeah, because it's just required in any commercial next to a residential. It's a 6-foot block wall.
Was my, as I recall, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a real high need for housing and whatnot. Typically I like commercial, but in this case where that's located, makes me a little uneasy.
I spoke with the applicant and he shared with me the need, the waiting list that he has for RV storage units that he thinks that it would fill up immediately. And I think that his intention, I don't want to speak for him, but I think his intent is that it would be RV storage for a time, and then it would evolve into another project. It would be more permanent in nature. Question for you, Drew, is where the development is at the north end of the roadway. And I know that generally the builder or the developer would build out. Where it's at that far other end, is that a typical thing to ask the developer to do, or is it a?
No, I mean, well, I can't say yes and no because we've done both in the past, and it's been justified why, because about location, and they say that in business has a lot to do with zoning as well, as far as I'm concerned, and accessibility. But again, it was just brought up, in the planning commission meeting. It's been one of my concerns is the narrowness of the road and that goes along the turf farm. It is what it is, and many of us have driven that road probably several times in our comings and goings. I find myself on that road quite often as well, looking at different things, and that's always been my concern about that road. It has nothing to do with the turns of the people. It's just it's problematic situation there.
I
just
drove
with the
it
amount of
today
people.
and looked at it, and tell me about what zoning would be required for the veterans home that's just right across the street there.
On which direction for?
I
On
think
the
that was
east.
an R3, if I recall.
It's an R3 for the veterans home
It's
that's
right across.
Yeah,
the
it is an R3 for the veterans home.
across the street. Is that zoned R3?
It's all zoned R3.
section
That
is
whole
R3
area,
across
yeah,
the
I could.
street.
In fact, I'll bring that up for you. We can doesn't take much to take a peek at that because we're really close by. Looking at some other things here. I need to get out of that particular one anyway and go to. Let's see how my day's gone depending on where my maps are. And the property you can see is. This is all R3 currently right now. The rest of the green area is residential agricultural. So, but it is all R3 right there. And then down below it where the Pine Valley Townhomes and Kings Row, et cetera, that's all PUD that they did many years ago. So I hope that helps kind of answer your question on there, what's existing.
Drew, the roadway would probably be more appropriately, if it's a concern, would probably be more appropriately considered at the zoning stage rather than the general plan stage.
In most cases, it would. I just, it's like sometimes I hate letting people get, sometimes if it's not going to go through as a zone thing, I just soon not be given at the general plan because it builds their hopes up and then crashes them, down. We've done that a few times in the past years, and it's a hard thing that I have to.
I think the council's voiced concerns.
Mhm.
Sounds like the planning commission voiced concerns. So you would think that the applicant has heard the warning shots, I guess, if that would be appropriately said. So when the zoning came through, you would like to hope that they may have some remedies or some thought processes or some discussion to take place.
Yeah.
And if it fell through, you certainly would understand why.
Yeah. And it's appropriate. And you could say, well, we're fine with it being commercial right now. Just we'll zone it when the road issue,
Correct.
that's a good point because it could happen at either one. I just, and it could be addressed at the zoning as well. Absolutely.
Any more discussion from the council? I'll look for a motion then.
I move that we disapprove this. Not necessarily the idea that that could be commercial with a 6-foot walk wall around it and be highly inappropriate, but because the road issue needs to be resolved.
Okay, the motion is for denial. Councilwoman Granger. Second.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilman Belliston. You, Councilman Ivy?
Oh, me, sorry, I'm still looking at the map. I think she makes a valid point. The road, I think, probably needs to be addressed. IBI.
Granger, aye.
Bellis, aye.
Nice and nay. I feel like that it will be eventually converted to housing or some other thing. So I think it's could be approved.
And I will vote nay as well. I think it could be handled during the zoning process. It passes 3-2. That has been denied. All right, item 12, road dedication. Consideration to approve a road dedication plat for a portion of 3650 South and 515 West. Applicant Dennis Patton.
Thank you. Sorry, we didn't have a report. We just needed to get this, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This is the new stake center being built on 3650, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they know they've had to dedicate part of the street that's left there that isn't built out over to the city. And so that's what this plat is doing in this hashed area, is now dedicating that portion that's left to the city, hoping that the council will accept that dedication as part of that road and part of, trying to remember, 515 West. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have in relationship to this plat dedication. Public Works has reviewed it and fine with it.
Any discussion for Drew? If not, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve a road dedication plat for a portion of 3650 South and 515 West.
Motion for approval by Councilman Belliston.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Ivy.
Nice and aye.
Bellis, aye.
Granger, aye.
IBI.
Turek, aye. Passes. Item 13, report from officers from assigned committees. Anything to report from your assigned committees? Seeing nothing, we'll go to item 14, our city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. And I was looking through our projects and I've updated most of you on where they're at. We've got some irrigation plans and water plans coming your direction, but I've already updated you on that. And so I was just looking it over, and I don't know if I have anything really new that I didn't bring up to you last time. So unless there's any questions.
Any questions for the manager? Any projects or anything? If not, then we'll move to item 15 and look for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion made to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Not that I know of, Troy. Maybe they would know.